The anime begins with the funeral of the protagonist, Mikazuki Subaru's parents who died in a car accident. A few days later, Subaru meets his editor, Koei's, at a restaurant. Since Subaru is a writer working at the Kobuma publishing house, they discuss his upcoming book. However, the young man feels overwhelmed by the large crowd and decides to leave. On his way out, he buys some flowers and heads to the cemetery to visit his parents. He starts thinking about how he would like to live on an island and be at peace, although he remembers that his parents always encouraged him to meet new people. Now he's worried about finding his story, and while preparing a meal to leave for his parents, a cat suddenly appears, startling Subaru and eating his food. Seeing the cat's mouth reminds him of his mother, but the cat has a terrifying look. However, Subaru holds the cat and comes up with an idea. Later, the young man calls his editor to tell him he plans to create a story about a killer cat for his next book. Koei likes the idea, but now Subaru has to deal not only with writing the first chapter by the end of the month, but also with his new companion, the cat. While Subaru is writing, he hears a noise and finds his friend Hiroto eating his food. Subaru is annoyed because Hiroto came in without permission and ate his food, even though his parents live nearby. Hiroto explains that he had a tough day and ended up staying out of the house. Hiroto is surprised to see the cat and is happy that Subaru will have some company. The next day, Subaru receives a lot of cat magazines and food for the kitten. Koei calls to check if Subaru received the package, which will help him learn more about these animals. Subaru turns around and sees his new companion watching him, thinking that the cat might be a spy. However, when he finds some cat food outside his room, he believes it was a trap but decides to throw the food away. This annoys the cat, but Subaru admits that he doesn't mind his presence as much as he does with people. In the following days, Subaru keeps finding food outside his room, which he ignores knowing the cat's tricks. He even closes the door in the cat's face. Several days later, the protagonist must present the first chapter of his book and is worried, but he cannot concentrate because the cat keeps meowing and scratching at the door. He regrets saying he didn't mind the cat's presence. When he goes out to quiet the cat, he starts to feel unwell and ends up on the floor. When Subaru wakes up, he finds Koei by his side, who had come to check on him because he hadn't been answering calls or messages. Koei knows that Subaru sometimes forgets to eat and sleep. He also tells Subaru that the notes on the floor can be used to finish the chapter. Subaru doesn't remember writing the notes but recalls not having eaten for days. He notices the cat food plate is empty, indicating that he ate it, which he considers a coincidence. Koei explains that when someone brings you food, it means they care about you, which makes Subaru think. Meanwhile, the cat explains that she followed Subaru because he gave her food and thought she could give him more. She was surprised that her human didn't move much and started to worry because he wasn't eating. She remembers her hungry siblings and a tabby cat that advised her to always return a favor. Determined to do so, she brought food to Subaru's door. However, seeing that Subaru threw it away upset her because food shouldn't be wasted, so she decided to return the favor and leave. As days pass, the cat is frustrated that Subaru won't eat. When he collapses outside his room, she recalls finding her brother dead from starvation and does everything to make Subaru eat, which she succeeds in. But when Subaru wakes up and begins acting strangely, writing notes and collapsing again, the cat checks on him and lies beside him. Once he wakes up and Koei leaves, the cat reappears and stands in front of Subaru, ready to leave but tells him to eat well. Seeing him wobble, she starts to think it might be a bad idea to leave him alone. While Subaru's in the kitchen, he thinks it's impossible for the cat to care about him. When he takes out a can of tuna, which drives the cat wild as she has only tried it once in her life, he gives it to her but asks her not to interrupt him too much. The cat changes her mind and decides to stay. The next day, Subaru decides to continue working, but his new companion prevents him from doing so as she is lying on top of his computer. Annoyed, he decides to feed her, but seeing that there is no food, he decides to order online. However, the cat prevents him from doing so, and the several days of waiting, he has no choice but to go out into the world to buy some. Upon arriving at the store, he finds that they don't have cat food, so he decides to buy bread. He then questions if it was a good idea and spots a pet store, deciding to go there. Once inside, he starts to regret his decision and plans to buy quickly and leave. They can't remember which food to buy. Fortunately, an employee approaches to help him and asks for the cat's name and age. Subaru is surprised that he needs to provide a name and age to make a purchase. He says his name is Subaru and he is 23 years old, which she thinks is quite old. He just wants to leave, but the girl provides the right food for Subaru to try. At that moment, they both realize they made a mistake. She apologizes for not asking the right questions and gives him another type of food for his cat. Upon learning that the cat doesn't have a name, she suggests giving it one. Subaru, embarrassed, takes the food and decides to leave. When he steps out, his editor calls. Hearing Subaru's agitation, Koei becomes concerned. He mentions that the book is doing well but asks about the cat's name. Subaru is irritated because everyone keeps asking about it, but Koei needs it for discussing with readers as the cat in the novel should have a name. This leaves Subaru thinking as he doesn't see the need for a name but starts considering it for the novel. Once home, Subaru notices that the cat is no longer on the computer, so he decides to continue working. However, he runs out of ideas and wants to look through the magazines in the box. When he opens it, he gets a shock as the cat is hiding inside. At that moment, he decides to name her and starts suggesting names at random to see her reaction. After a while, Subaru continues trying different names and the cat throws some books at him. Subaru picks them up and sees that one is a story his mother used to read to him. He starts having memories and thinks of the name Haru, which the cat responds to. She then runs to the plate and he feeds her. Later, as Subaru leaves the house, he tells Haru to wait for him, though he wonders why he's talking to a cat. Meanwhile, the cat understands that Haru is a warm word meaning food. During the day, she had found a warm place to sleep on the human's computer. When he tried to remove her, she resisted, but later she got up when the computer turned off and began to cool down. She decided to go get food, as now she can eat whenever she wants, but finds nothing in her plate. Hearing some noises, she goes to the kitchen to investigate and finds Hiroto, whom she doesn't know, so she runs away and hides in a box. After falling asleep, she wakes up when Subaru opens the box and they both get startled, but she decides to keep sleeping. However, she can't because the human won't stop talking. She throws some books at him, but then hears the word Haru, which reminds her of a girl named Haru who used to feed her. The cat thought Haru meant food, so she asks her human for more food, but he simply leaves. The next day, Subaru is calmly reading a book when suddenly his cat starts behaving strangely, jumping around everywhere. He doesn't understand why she's acting this way. Later, while he's lying on the floor reading, the cat continues her erratic behavior and even jumps on him before running away. Subaru hears a noise and upon investigating, finds his parents' shrine knocked over, which makes him angry with his pet, causing her to be scared. After cleaning up, Subaru notices that his cat shows no remorse. At that moment, his editor calls, wanting to meet up. Subaru refuses to go out and he learns they need to go to a restaurant. However, Koei's, hearing about the cats in Subaru's home, decides to visit. Subaru is not pleased with the idea and starts remembering how his parents, who always enjoyed going out and traveling, would invite him. He wonders why they had a son who didn't like those things. Later, Koei arrives at Subaru's house and begins asking about the cats. Subaru tells him he has already put them outside, but then Koei finds Haru and is enchanted by her. He tries to pet her, but Haru doesn't like the idea. Koei then proposes that they hold all their meetings at Subaru's house. Subaru agrees since his meetings aren't frequent, and it's convenient for him not to have to leave home. However, he's surprised when Koei starts visiting daily, making him unsure if it's for work or play. Koei gets annoyed when asked to hold the cat, as he doesn't usually do that or pet her. Haru scratches him, prompting Koei to leave but promising to return. Later, Subaru continues working on his novel but runs out of ink, so he decides to look for more. After some time, he enters his parents' room again. Haru follows him and starts jumping around, knocking over some albums. Subaru remembers how much his mother loved organizing albums, and upon opening one, sees that all the photos are from places they had visited with notes for places to take him, some of which were heavily touristed. Subaru realizes that despite his constant refusals, his parents never stopped inviting him. That day, he regrets not having accepted their invitations, and he starts crying. Haru approaches him and begins to comfort him, so for the first time, Subaru pets her. Meanwhile, Haru is very happy in her new home, but is frightened by two clouds in the same room with her and Subaru. She jumps around to chase them away, which she does all day, ultimately destroying the altar to Subaru's parents. Later, when Koei leaves, Subaru goes to his parents' room with Haru and sees that the clouds are still there. He ends up knocking over some albums, but asks the clouds to leave his home and Subaru. Seeing her human cry, Haru approaches and comforts him, telling him not to worry and that she will protect him while licking him. She is surprised when Subaru pets her in return. Later, as Subaru sleeps, the same clouds appear and Haru asks them to leave. The clouds then transform into Subaru's parents, who thank the cat. Later, Koei arrives at Subaru's house, worried because his friend hadn't answered him. Subaru explains he simply fell asleep. Seeing Subaru wet from the rain, Koei tries to thank him for what he's done, but when he sees Haru, he becomes overwhelmed. By Subaru's decision, Koei feeds Haru and the three of them feel happy together. The next day, Subaru is peacefully reading a book with Haru when Hirono and Koei show up. Hirono has a stew, and Koei came to visit Haru, but Haru isn't very pleased while Subaru thought he could enjoy a quiet day. When they are all together, Koei and Hirono introduce themselves as they didn't know each other before. Koei mentions he came to Subaru's house because something happened at work. He realized that the cat didn't have a collar, which is important. Because of this, Subaru has to go buy a collar for the cat since Koei insisted that he get one to prevent her from getting lost. Although he doesn't understand why his friend is accompanying him, Hirono takes him to the pet store he had already visited. When they enter, the girl at the store recognizes Subaru and greets him, asking what he needs. Subaru says that Haru needs a collar, which makes the girl happy because he finally gave her a name. Hirono is puzzled by how the girl knows his friend, but he introduces himself and asks her to help Subaru. Subaru is glad to have his friend with him but gets anxious when Hirono has to leave, leaving him alone. The girl shows Subaru the collar designs, suggesting that since Haru is a cat, she should have a cute design. However, she mentions that cats sometimes get stressed from wearing collars and might end up removing them, so she advises Subaru to keep this in mind. When the girl leaves to attend to another customer, Subaru thinks about why he hesitated so much and recalls when his mother gave him a sweater. He starts imagining Haru with different collars and eventually decides on one. While trying to pay, a woman with a cat approaches and starts talking to Subaru. He's surprised but responds as he normally would, and they discuss veterinarians and pet checkups. When the shocked girl learns that Haru hasn't been to the vet, she insists Subaru take her, as she might have a health issue. Because of this, Subaru leaves the store with several cat products. At the vet's office, Subaru is told that Haru, though a stray, is well-fed but slightly overweight, which could lead to heart and respiratory problems and potentially be fatal. This worries Subaru, but the vet reassures him, jokingly saying that Subaru himself should worry about his own weight as he's very skinny. This annoys Subaru a bit, but he overhears someone mentioning that their stray animal used to eat a lot and now needs a diet. This makes Subaru feel guilty about Haru being overweight. They give him a credential for Haru for future checkups. At that moment, a dog approaches Haru, which scares Subaru, but fortunately, nothing happens. Upon returning home, the girl from the store recognizes Subaru before he enters and asks how the checkup went. Subaru is surprised to see her since he didn't want to see anyone else, but explains that he was told Haru is a bit plump. Learning that her cat also had this issue but has now achieved an ideal weight, she desperately asks for advice. She agrees to help, but Subaru regrets asking as it didn't seem appropriate. Back home, he remembers the collar and tries to put it on Haru, but she resists. He eventually manages to put it on by calling her with food and realizes it looks good on her. Meanwhile, at the vet's office, Haru is scared by the unfamiliar environment and other anxious pets, but decides to be brave and strong to help her human. After the vet checks her, she feels exhausted and thinks all humans are bad. At that moment, a dog approaches her, recognizing her as a neighbor who always wanted to play with her. The dog tells her about a woman who used to care for him but is no longer there and expresses how much he likes the vet's office because they take good care of him and keep him healthy, which makes his family worry less. This makes Haru think that maybe Subaru feels the same way. When she gets home, she admits that she doesn't need Subaru to take care of her and should be concerned about him instead. When Subaru tries to put the collar on her, she escapes and wins. But after he feeds her, she notices the collar on her, and though she doesn't know what it is, remembers seeing a cat with something similar and thought it was cute. Now she's happy with it, but the sound of the Bell brothers' Subaru, and he takes it off, which displeases Haru. The next day, the store girl visits the protagonist unexpectedly. At that moment, she introduces herself as Nana Okami, as she had never done before. While there, she finally meets Haru and says that Haru isn't that plump, but she still asks to see how Subaru normally feeds her. Subaru fills the bowl with food, but Okami is surprised and apologizes, saying she was just startled. She recommends giving Haru smaller portions to avoid sudden changes that could stress her, and suggests that Subaru use a bottle of the whole for feeding, allowing Haru to eat gradually. Seeing this, Subaru notices that Haru enjoys it, so he starts taking notes. Nana then shows Subaru a photo of her cat, explaining that it didn't like exercising, which made Subaru surprised by how overweight it was, but Nana mentions it lost weight since then. She also shows a photo of a new addition, a cat very similar to Haru. Subaru comments that the cats look alike, which brings back memories of his parents. When Okami leaves, Subaru wonders if Haru misses her family. However, he soon realizes that Nana forgot her keys. He tries to catch up with her, but Haru won't let him, so he grabs Haru and runs after Nana. When he finds her, she realizes that Haru got caught in her shoe, so she takes both of them to her house. Once there, Haru enters the home even though Subaru is hesitant. Okami's cat appears and starts playing with Haru, which worries Subaru as his cat bit the other one. When Nana appears, Subaru asks her to keep her cat away from his because it's attacking Haru. Nana explains that the cats are getting along and Haru might have just bitten the other to make it stop bothering her. At that moment, Nana calls her cat, and Subaru is surprised to see it respond immediately. He comments that he has never been able to do that, so he decides to try and succeeds. Haru comes to him and Subaru picks her up and hugs her, which Haru likes. That same day, Haru notices many people that come to her home. She hopes the girl won't be as bothersome as Koei's. She approaches but feels the food and her human doesn't let her get it. Okami gives Haru a bottle with food and Haru enjoys playing with it while eating. When Okami sees a key on the floor, she is intrigued by the smell of the keychain. When Subaru tries to retrieve it, Haru won't let him until they reach Okami's house. Upon arrival, Haru smells a familiar scent and enters the house where she sees a small cat peeking out. Both cats are surprised to see each other as they are siblings. Okami is amazed that they have reunited after some time. Her brother is very happy to see her and explains that he was the only one who escaped when the crows appeared, but Nana saved him and named him Hachi, saying he is something special and only for him. When Haru hears this, she realizes her brother is well cared for, but she asks why her human calls her Haru. Hachi explains that it must be her name. When Subaru calls Haru, she decides to go to him, and seeing Subaru so happy makes her happy too. The next day, a young man arrives at Nana's home and grabs the protagonist to question what he is doing there and his relationship with her. Subaru pauses for a moment, which annoys the guy, but Nana asks him to apologize as he is a customer from the pet store. The guy apologizes, introducing himself as Yugo Okami, Nana's younger brother. He admits that he saw Subaru fall when he entered and thought he was drunk. What surprises Subaru most is how big a Yugo is for someone in high school. Later, the two boys sit facing each other, and Subaru is unsure what to do. Hachi appears and is with Yugo, so Subaru realizes he's gotten used to being around the cat. Yugo notices that Subaru has a novel and mentions that he also likes it, commenting that he was reading a novel about a killer cat and suggests Subaru read it because it's very good and that Haru reminds him of that cat. Nana also says she likes the novel, and they both ask Subaru if he likes to read. Subaru starts to feel pressure, not realizing his novel might interest them, so he decides to leave with Haru without admitting that he wrote it. As he leaves, Nana follows him out, apologizing for her brother's behavior and asking him to visit again with Haru. On the way, Subaru reflects on how he didn't realize his novels could affect others' lives and desires. At Nana's house, Haru notices the large cat living there and feels concerned about being in another cat's territory. However, when Roku introduces himself, he is very kind and tells her not to worry about his brother as he will take care of him. Hachi runs off with Yugo, and Haru is frightened by Hachi's size, but Roku reassures her that Hachi is a kind human and that they are all family, including Haru as Hachi's sister. Haru is confused by this word again, but Subaru picks her up and decides to take her home, which makes Hachi a bit sad. Haru is unsure what to do, feeling she would be abandoning her brother, but doesn't want to leave her human alone. Roku calms Hachi, telling him that Subaru will likely visit them again. On the way home, Haru remembers being abandoned. After leaving the box, they encountered a vast world and saw a human. One of the cats went out to ask for food, but the man ignored them since he didn't like cats. The dog then appeared, scaring them, and they ran away. Lost and hungry, a stray cat named Tora found them and told them to leave her territory. When she learned they were lost, she led them to a distant place where abandoned cats lived, teaching them to survive by finding their own food and asking Haru to watch over her siblings as the eldest. While searching for food, another stray cat warned Haru to hide from dangerous birds. Haru thanked the cat for saving her. The next day, the kittens saw humans eating and wanted to join them, but Haru forbade it, saying they first needed to ensure the humans were kind. Unfortunately, two of the kittens went to the humans anyway, and Tora told Haru that if she found the right humans, she would find her happy destiny. Haru realized that two of her siblings had already found their destiny. Later, Tora and her friends fought off two crows, allowing the kittens to escape but leaving them lost and hungry. Haru asked them to wait while she went to find food. Upon returning, Haru noticed she had taken a long time and saw that one of her siblings was on the ground, injured and not breathing. She remembered her remaining sibling and went looking for him, but never found him until today when she found him in Nana's apartment. Haru felt relieved that he had also found his destiny and a family, but wondered if she would be able to find it too. Holding on to Subaru, she decided to stay with him and be part of his family. The next day, the protagonist needs to write an epilogue for his book but can't think of anything. He carefully takes a cat magazine as Haru is sleeping on it. He lies down next to her and reads the magazine, eventually falling asleep. In his dream, he recalls being a child and loving the story of the moon and the sun. Inspired, he decided to continue the story and wrote his first book. Later, his mother calls him because they have visitors, and he meets Hiroto and Nagiza, who are their new neighbors. Subaru, eager to share his favorite book about the sun and the moon, plans to show it to them, but when he returns, they are already gone. During his childhood, Subaru was a solitary child, watching others play in groups while he preferred the library or simply reading books. When he is older, Hiroto's mother drops him off at Subaru's house because she needs to take Nagisa to the hospital. Hiroto, very outgoing, is thrilled to see so many books and shares a day of reading with Subaru. Hiroto asks if Subaru wants to be a librarian due to his extensive collection, but Subaru only wishes to create books himself. When Subaru's parents read his story, they are delighted and want to know how it ends, which bothers Subaru because they read his work without permission. That night, he decides to send his story to a publisher and wins a contest, only to be later informed that it will be published in volumes. Upon waking, Subaru realizes he has slept a lot but hears noises coming from the kitchen. Alarmed, he goes to investigate and finds Hiroto on the floor. Hiroto explains that he almost stepped on Haru, stumbled, and fell along with the food he brought. Haru had jumped onto a piece of furniture out of fear. Subaru starts to help but notices the first book he ever wrote, which is the second volume of The Sun and the Moon. Hiroto mentions that it took him a while to return it, but Subaru is sure he never lent it to him. Hiroto insists he did, recalling how he once saw Subaru reading while walking and even falling into a creek, only caring about his book. Subaru doesn't remember this but recalls a dream about visiting Hiroto's room. Hiroto thought Subaru would become a librarian. Hiroto then asks Subaru what he would do if he fell into water while reading with Haru, wanting to know whom he would save. Subaru asks Haru to come down so he can feed her, but she ends up falling on his face and later Subaru feels unwell and faints. When he wakes up, Hiroto is by his side, but Kawase quickly arrives, concerned because he fainted from a fever, likely due to stress over the book's publication. Subaru hesitates to admit it was because he tried to imitate his cat sleeping on the floor. The editor, very worried, says he bought medicine and other necessities and asks Subaru to get comfortable while he prepares the food. Hiroto comments that Kawase is behaving like a mother. As Subaru rests, he hears noisy sounds from the kitchen. Haru enters the room and lies on him for company. That afternoon, Haru sleeps peacefully on her human's books but tries to wake him up when she sees he's still asleep. Noticing he is deeply asleep, she decides to leave him and look for food. Finding nothing, she decides to prepare a meal to make him happy when he wakes up. However, everything goes wrong. She knocks over a can of tuna, which gets stuck, and while trying to remove it, she becomes trapped in another can. Hiroto appears, and in trying to avoid hurting her, he falls while she ends up on a piece of furniture. Subaru wakes up and realizes she couldn't prepare the meal. He calls her down and she falls on his head, causing him to faint again. Later, after Subaru wakes up, Haru visits him, feeling guilty for causing his fainting and thinking she is too weak, but reassures him that she will protect him. After a few days, Haru becomes worried about her human because he is acting stranger than usual. This time, the protagonist leaves dressed in a suit and tells her he's leaving food for her since he can't take care of her. After he leaves, the cat gets upset and declares that she will no longer worry about him, though now she can relax in the house and sleep. However, when she tries to rest, the neighbor's dog calls out to her wanting to play as his family is away and he is alone, but Haru isn't interested. When Haru wakes up, she decides to eat but still feels hungry and starts asking for more. Noticing that Subaru hasn't returned, she goes to his room to look for him, but he isn't there either, so she lies down on his bed and begins to feel his scent, which comforts her. She stays there to sleep, feeling warm and thinking it would be better if he were there. Later, Haru hears the door and thinks Subaru has returned, but it turns out to be the neighbors. This upsets her because she doesn't know why he hasn't come back or what he is doing, so in her frustration, she starts to mess up the entire room and break things. Meanwhile, Subaru is at Yanagawa bookstore for a book signing. Seeing the crowd, he begins to regret coming and hides from them, but Kawase is there to support him. When the signing starts, a man approaches and kindly asks for his autograph. Subaru becomes nervous, as he only needs to write his name, but when he makes a mistake, he apologizes, though the man is very happy. This makes Subaru realize that people truly admire him, and many express their support and enthusiasm for his books, leaving him surprised. Then, a child, who claims to be a big fan and loves reading, introduces himself to Subaru and extends his hand. Subaru is momentarily frozen, not knowing how to react, but eventually shakes his hand and thanks him. After the signing ends, Subaru feels he was surrounded by people and experienced genuine warmth, similar to being with friends. He then feels embarrassed for not properly thanking people earlier due to his nervousness. Kawase promises that he can do it next time. Subaru starts to think about Haru, realizing he has never left her alone for such a long time and even noticed she meowed more than usual. He is sure he left enough food for her to last the day. At that moment, Kawase appears with one last reader for him to see. Subaru is surprised to find it is Okami, who is also shocked to learn he is the author of the book. She reminds him that they discussed his book at her house, but he never mentioned it. Subaru starts to feel that she might feel betrayed because he never confessed, so he decides to apologize. However, she also apologizes, saying he might have felt uncomfortable hearing them talk as if they knew more than him, though that wasn't the case. Subaru admits he was happy they read his book and supported him, thanking her. Kawase interrupts, wondering what is going on between them, and Subaru thanks him for being by his side and working with him, extending his hand. The man is moved by his words. Later, Subaru comes home after a long day, but upon entering, he sees the mess and immediately thinks burglars have broken in. He rushes to find Haru, who later appears inside a sweater. Seeing the books, Subaru realizes that she is the culprit. That day, Haru became frustrated because Subaru hadn't returned, so she made a mess and got stuck in the sweater. She woke up when she heard her name called by Subaru. Seeing him, she asks for food since she has been outside all day, and he gives her food, which makes her happy as she is also hungry. Meanwhile, Subaru cleans up the mess. After several days, Subaru wakes up because his cat won't let him rest, even though he has slept almost an entire day. Upon waking, he finds an email from Hiroto informing him that his younger sister will visit Haru along with her friend the next day, but it is already that day and the two girls are currently outside. One of the twins, along with Haru, arrives at the house and apologizes for coming unannounced. This doesn't bother Subaru, but they have brought a gift. Food prepared by Haru's mother, as Hiroto suggested it would be a good gift since he rarely eats. Haru then asks Subaru if he can prepare the food for her as he used to, bringing the ingredients with her. Subaru agrees, so they head to the kitchen to prepare it, but the cat is there and everyone worries she might get hurt. Subaru removes her from the kitchen, though the feline insists on re-entering. Once the meal is prepared, the cat eats her food while the others eat theirs together. The twin asks Subaru why he never eats, especially since he liked the food so much now. He simply says he forgets to eat, which Haru understands. She explains that when her mother's restaurant was busy, she used to eat alone but began waiting to eat with her mother until the day Haru arrived and learned to cook for her. This reminds Subaru that he usually eats when he's with his companion. After the meal, the cat falls asleep next to Subaru and the girls leave. Before they go, Subaru asks them to teach him to cook like that, which Haru agrees to. The next day, Subaru receives mail and finds a book from the girls containing the recipe for Haru's food. Since he doesn't have the ingredients, he needs to go to the supermarket. At the store, a child approaches him, making him nervous, but fortunately, her mother takes her away. Subaru thinks he has all the ingredients, although he's unsure about the meat. Employees then approach him, offering various products, and he feels too embarrassed to refuse. At that moment, Hiroto appears and helps his friend out of the predicament, which excites Subaru. Back home, Subaru starts preparing the food but finds it very difficult as it's his first time cooking. He even measures the food for Haru to ensure she can eat without issue. However, the cat is hungry and tries to reach her food. Subaru asks her to wait a bit longer as he has made too much progress to stop now. After finishing, though he injures himself in the process, Haru doesn't want to eat. Subaru eats his portion, and then he realizes she starts eating too, which makes him happy as it's the first time he's prepared something for someone. The previous day, Haru worries because the human hasn't eaten, so she wakes him up to eat, but then she sees him leaving. Later, she smells food and runs to the source, finding the girls. She then senses a smell from the kitchen and tries to enter but is removed, which upsets her greatly. Eventually, she gets her food and is delighted but wants to save some for Subaru. However, it's too late as she's eaten it all. Climbing onto the table, she sees that there is still a lot of food, which makes her faint on top of Subaru. The next day, Haru continues trying to make the young man eat something. He simply feeds her, and she tries to save a little for him but ends up finishing everything. When Subaru returns from shopping, she notices he hasn't eaten, so she tries to give him her food, but he removes her, asking her to wait a bit longer. Later, Subaru gives Haru the food he prepared, which she loves the smell of but decides not to eat it to save it for him. However, upon seeing him eating too, she decides to join him and eat her portion. She stays by his side, saying she worries about him a lot and that he needs to make sure to eat to have strength for the next day. After the book signing was a success, Koi's proposes to the protagonist that he work on a series next. However, after a month, he still has no ideas. While watering the plants his mother used to tend, he ends up accidentally spraying the neighbor's dog. The young man apologizes to the neighbor, saying he was distracted. The neighbor reassures him that her dog enjoyed the bath, and she apologizes for having been watering her garden the entire time. Now he understands why the garden looks so good after all this time. She also tells him that those flowers were planted by his mother, who brought the seeds from her travels. When the neighbor leaves, the young man begins to think about his mother and how much she cared for him. When he enters the house, he doesn't find Haru, so he thinks she might be scared. He then hears someone at the door and goes to check, finding it's Koi's. The man says he stopped because he heard someone say Subaru's name. At that moment, Yugo appears and bows to the protagonist. Inside the house, Yugo apologizes to the young man for treating him poorly and distrusting him when they first met. Upon learning that he was the author of the book, Yugo felt a strong desire to apologize but feared that Subaru wouldn't want to hear it. However, Subaru thanks him for his support of his book. At that moment, Haru appears and shows affection to Yugo, and then to Subaru, which leaves Koi's disheartened, especially when he sees that Haru took a liking to Yugo right away. When Yugo leaves, the editor asks Subaru how the series is going. Subaru admits he has no ideas, so Koi suggests taking a break, though he later regrets it as he doesn't like going out. To his surprise, Subaru agrees. Later, Subaru isn't sure where to go, so when he goes outside to the garden, he notices that one of the pots hasn't grown anything. He remembers that his mother must have planned to plant something there and then recalls that she never returned from that trip. He calls Koi to tell him where he plans to go, which is to the place his parents were going to visit last time. The editor arranges the tickets but advises him to have someone take care of Haru since she will be left alone. The next day, Subaru mentions the trip to Okima, who recommends leaving Haru at Pet Hotel. Subaru then needs to get her into her pet carrier. He recalls that she didn't want to enter the carrier when he took her to the vet, but he has a plan. He puts some food inside the carrier, and when Haru goes in, he closes the zipper but grabs her tail, causing her to panic and escape. Despite the plan failing, he asks Hiroto to look after her and shows him how much to feed her. At that moment, Koi's calls to finalize the details of the trip, where they will stay at the same hotel his parents would have stayed. On the day of his trip, Subaru says goodbye to Haru. When he arrives at the hotel, the innkeeper tells him she is glad he decided to go on the trip because 3 years ago, they made a reservation with the same surname for 3 people, but then canceled it. Subaru starts to remember that his mother always invited him to trips, even at the last moment, but he always refused. As he walks around, he wonders what his mother wanted him to see in this place. He later sees a lovely blue painting and the innkeeper notices that the color suits him well. However, Subaru can't stop thinking about his parents and how his mother knew he liked that color, though he wonders what he should be looking for in this place. Meanwhile, Haru wakes up after sleeping all day and sees that Subaru hasn't returned yet. She's not worried since this has happened before, so she snuggles under his coat. Meanwhile, Subaru returns home but needs to get some flowers, which he hasn't managed to get. The owner of the place asks him to wait and gives him some flowers from the garden. Later, the lady returns with the flowers, but Subaru feels embarrassed as she is drenched because a storm is coming. Due to this, when the young man goes to the airport, his flight is cancelled. After the protagonist missed his flight, he decided to take the bullet train, which fortunately arrived on time. He calls one of his friends to check on Haru as she is still alone. After the call, he feels worried because his cat is alone and the storm in the city is worsening. That morning, Haru wakes up and sees that Subaru hasn't returned yet. She starts hearing strange noises that frighten her and looks out the window to see a storm. She remembers being in a storm with her younger siblings who were scared. At that moment, she hears the door open and runs out, thinking it might be Subaru, but it turns out to be Hiroto. Due to the storm, Hiroto can't close the door, so Haru seizes the opportunity to escape, thinking that Subaru might have collapsed somewhere and goes out to look for him. Hiroto realizes the cat has escaped and calls his friend to inform him of what happened. The protagonist asks Hiroto to stay at home in case Haru returns while he goes out to search for her, since he has just arrived in the city. Subaru begins to feel anxious, fearing something might happen to Haru. Subaru searches for Haru, but despite canvassing the neighborhood and asking people around, he cannot find her. At that moment, Koi's calls him, saying he knows what happened to his cat. He tells Subaru to go back home so Hiroto can search the area, as he knows it well. He also suggests thinking of places that stray cats might like to visit. However, the call drops, so Subaru decides to go to the pet store where he finds Okima. He explains the situation to her, and she and her brother head out to look for Haru where stray cats usually go. Meanwhile, Hiroto searches elsewhere in the neighborhood and Kawei places food around the house to lure Haru back, but none of their efforts succeed. Subaru goes to the cemetery, thinking she might be there, and opens a can of tuna while calling for her, but he finds no sign of her. Meanwhile, Haru continues searching for Subaru, but a strong gust of wind blows her into a water drain. Despite her efforts to climb out, she can't. She begins to feel scared and alone, but then she hears a familiar voice calling her name. She knows it's her human, so she meows loudly to get his attention. Subaru manages to find her and tries to get her out, but since the drain is a bit high, he falls into the water. However, he lets Haru out to keep her from getting wet, feeling relieved as he was very worried. When his friends arrive, he tells them he's stuck in the drain and Yugo asks for his hand to help him out. Subaru first hands Haru to Yugo, reminding Hiroto of the time he saved the book from getting wet, which happens again. Once everything is settled, everyone is at Subaru's house, having spent the night searching for Haru. After they eat, he thanks everyone for their help. That night, when Haru is with Subaru, she tells him not to worry about her safety even though he fell into the drain. She was concerned that he might be hungry and unable to move, but fortunately, the others arrive to help. When they are at home, Okima gives Haru a bath to clean her after being out in the storm, which left her exhausted and hungry. As she eats, she notices Subaru is also eating, which makes her happy. As everyone leaves, both Subaru and Haru comfort each other, having learned what it means to have companionship, care for others, and have a home, forming a family. A few days later, Kawei informs his colleagues that Subaru has chosen a theme for his next book, which will be about family, covering not only his parents but also Haru and his friends.